I had people come up and tell me, I needed something. And Carter literally gave me the shirt he was wearing because it was cooler than what I had on. And he just was the kid that would do anything for anybody. We'd laugh because he'd be the one that bring home strays, not animals, kids, these kids that didn't have anybody else. And he always just said, Mom, they don't know what it's like to have somebody love them. They don't know what it's like to have somebody stand up for them. They don't know what it's like to have a mom like you and a dad like Dad and brothers like we have. And my sister, everybody loves each other and we're loyal and, we defend each other and, we come as a team. And if he brought them home, they stayed. If they stayed for 2 nights or they stayed for, 5 years, that's what he did. He wanted everybody to know, you have somebody in your corner, and you will always have somebody in your corner.
This is Failing Justice.
Let's talk about Carter and his relationship with his ex-girlfriend. And for purpose of this podcast and legal reasons, we're not going to mention names. So when we talk about the other parties involved in this, we will use things like the family, the daughter, the dad, things like that, just for legal things that are going on right now. So let's talk about Carter's relationship with his ex-girlfriend.
So they all kind of met at school. They were friends. Carter and the ex-girlfriend were friends for a good year before they started dating. Our families went on vacations to Colorado together. All of our kids were friends. My daughter worked for them for about 2 years. Carter and their daughter started dating in June of 2018. He considered them his parents. He called them mom. He called them dad. He was over there almost 24/7. They lived about 2 miles away from us, and they were constantly together, best friends. He really looked up to the parents and just, he kind of idolized them. Their house was the fun house. They had all the toys to play with, and Carter loved it over there because he was, go, and wanted to have fun. And he loved their daughter. He loved her. As a friend, they were best friends. They talked about everything. He was we went on vacation in January 2019. We came home about a week later and everything blew up. Apparently there was a couple girls at school that had started a rumor that she was pregnant. The parents made the kids break up. They told Carter, tell him it's because we caught y'all kissing and don't ever say anything else. He was threatened. The dad said if he said anything else differently, he would kill him. For about 2 weeks after that, the kids were visibly devastated. I had other parents even go, oh my gosh, are they okay? But during that time frame, after about 2 weeks, Carter started getting texts again from the mom. And she would be like, hey, just let this blow over. We love you. We miss you. The dad will get over it. They started letting the daughter text Carter from the mom's phone. All of the stuff back and forth. It was more of Carter didn't know whether he was coming or going. We can talk, we can't.
So let's talk about how old was Carter and the daughter?
When they started dating, she was 14 and Carter was 15. They're less than a year apart.
And when you say things blew up, do you know? Do you have what was their reasoning behind having to break them up and no longer allow them to have a relationship?
Well, I was never told why. There was never a reason given to me by them. In about 2 weeks after they broke up, Carter went to a basketball game and the dad approached him and said if he talked to her, he'd fucking kill him. And Carter came home upset about it. And my husband went to the game and asked them, what is going on? Like, what in the world is going on? And he just said that there had been some rumors started and they didn't want their daughter to get a bad reputation and that the kids were very attracted to each other and they thought they needed some space. that she was too young and he was too young. And at this point, they were both 15. Carter was 15 and a half. It was just, they never gave an exact reason for it. They just said they didn't want her to get a bad reputation.
So this was, when you say they went to school together, what school was that?
Cayuga.
And that was in Anderson County, right?
Yes, Anderson County.
Okay, so let's talk about, obviously without, to be respectful of the legal things going on, but I do want to kind of lay a foundation about who this family was. Can you tell me, were they involved in the community? Did they have connections in the community? Because anybody that's listened to my podcast up to now, they know, this is, I've said this, we're calling this particular season 1, and everything's just kind of focused on Palestine, Texas, Anderson County, because that's where I worked as a police officer. I know how that county operates, and I know how, if you're, and I use this term loosely and not even, I even hate using this term, but they call them the elite of Palestine, quote unquote. And I just kind of laugh at that, because Palestine is its own little small dot on the map. And a lot of these people that call themselves the elite would not be anything outside of that little town. So what I want to know is, were they involved? Did they have connections? Are they from there? Kind of talk about that.
Yes, they're from Anderson County. They all went to Cayuga growing up. Their families are from Cayuga. They are heavily involved in the school and had a lot of control there for some reason. I've actually, some of the teachers would have conversations about being afraid of them. That one of the teachers got threatened with a lawsuit because one of the kids got a B and she was pressured to change a grade. Like, they had more control than what anyone should in the school district and in the area. And I still don't know why. I mean, from growing up there somewhat and the rest of it, I'm not sure why they had the amount of control that they did.
So Carter was a juvenile, and he ended up getting arrested or detained. Tell me about the day that happened, how it happened, how you found out, and then I want to get into the details behind it. But tell me about that particular day. It's my understanding you didn't see that coming, and I want to know about all that day, him getting arrested.
So on September 13th, 2019, Carter was arrested by the Anderson County Sheriff's Department at school in front of his friends, taken out in handcuffs and shackles, taken to the juvenile office in Palestine. We never had a phone call from anyone leading up to this. No one from the sheriff's office talked to us. No police officers talked to us. There was no restraining orders done. There was nothing that led to this, that he would get arrested for stalking. And we didn't know it was going to take place. We had no clue anything was happening. We got a phone call from Carter. They allowed him to call us from school and say, "Hey, I'm getting arrested. They're taking me to juvenile. Here's where it is." We weren't home at the time. We rushed to where he was and got to the juvenile office. And at that point, we're told that they were sending him to the juvenile facility in Longview because there was no judge available on the Friday, and that we would not be able to have a court hearing until Monday. And so we assumed at that point he would be held those 3 days and then released to us. And he was not. He was held for 11 days.
So when they arrested him, you're saying there was no investigation leading up to that. You guys had no clue that was coming. And I just want to interject my experience on that for just a minute. I worked quite a bit with juveniles, and the truth of the matter is if I was working a case on a juvenile, typically I would involve the parents. They would know something about it, unless it was just a heinous offense. I worked a robbery one time, a home invasion, and there were several juveniles involved. ended up shooting the guy through the door. And something like that, you don't really have a lot of time to play around with and mess around with, and you do what you got to do, and then you talk to the parents later. But something like this, it doesn't sound like there was anything violent or anything crazy that went on. I mean, talk about the charge and what they had told you when you went to the juvenile office about what his arrest was for.
Well, we got there, we asked, and she said she didn't have the paperwork from the sheriff's office or the DA's office at that moment, and that it was for stalking. And so we waited there for a while because, of course, Carter had to wait for transport. And she finally got some of the paperwork, but she said it wasn't all of it, and said that the main item that they used to arrest Carter was a copy of a Snapchat that was blown up so big you couldn't even see the username. There was a copy of a Snapchat blown up so big on the piece of paper that you couldn't even see the username. And it was threats made towards the school, the principal, and another parent. None of it had anything to do with the ex-girlfriend or the family. And it was not Carter's. The Snapchat was not made by Carter. The Snapchat was actually made by another student. And the school was aware of it. It was made by another student because he had been punished. Juvenile had actually been called because this kid had a juvenile record. Juvenile had actually been called that he'd made this. He was in ISS at school and being punished for it. And they still used it knowingly to arrest Carter with.
I don't know, man. That's wild. So, I mean, if the charge was stalking and, which is a third degree felony, I think it's a very hard charge to put on adults. Even you have to have documented incidents, multiple incidents leading up to these charges. Like if an ex-girlfriend calls the police and say, "Hey, my ex-boyfriend's stalking me," first thing we would ask is, okay, well, what do you have? Like what proof do you have? Is he, showing up at your place? Is he doing it electronically? And so we would ask all these questions, and we would have to create a trail. We would have to document several incidents because that's what the statute reads is you have to have more than one. The person has to be aware that they are doing it and that you've asked them to stop. And so I'm assuming the answer is no, but I'll ask anyway. I mean, obviously if you weren't contacted, if Carter wasn't contacted saying, "Hey, look, if you're doing this, you need to go ahead and cut it out because you're going to get yourself in trouble if you don't." Did any of that happen before he was arrested?
No, we were never contacted by anyone in law enforcement at all regarding any of this.
Okay, so he gets arrested on a Friday. You guys get told that he's going to have a hearing on Monday. Now, let's talk about what happened when Monday rolls around. What did you guys find out? What did y'all do?
So on Monday, we're sitting with the attorney, and he tells us that they are not going to release Carter, that the judge wants a psychiatric evaluation before Carter can be released because they feel he's a danger. Even though in all of the paperwork and all of their so-called evidence, there is literally nothing that is violent. Nothing. There are text messages back and forth between Carter and both of the parents and the daughter, and they're friendly. They're friendly and initiated by them, not by Carter. Up until he was arrested, they were texting him. Friendly. Pictures back and forth, friendly. And the judge wanted a psychiatric evaluation ordered. They said that would take 2 to 3 weeks. And they ended up finding somebody else to do it sooner. And so that was ordered and said that we would have to come back after he had that evaluation.
So the question that I have is how he was a danger. I mean, that just kind of, that's one of the big questions that sticks out to me. And, going back to my experience and, I've arrested plenty of juveniles, and I've arrested plenty of juveniles and taken them to that particular office. Emily Lane and Julie, I can't remember her last name, but they're the ones who operate that office. And my experience with them was they always, and again, if anybody's following this journey of this podcast in season 1 in Palestine, their relationship with the police chief, had a relationship with all these people. And so me as a detective doing an investigation, they would always interfere with what I was trying to do. I couldn't even do a proper investigation because it was whatever they wanted to happen was what had to happen. And if I wasn't doing it, the way they wanted or when they wanted, they would always call the police chief. And, then it would come down the pipe to me of the direction I need to go and I need to change. But in my experience working in that office, unless it was a violent crime, unless it was somebody who we had history with or was a repeat offender, typically, sometimes they would even get released the same day. At max, we're talking 2 to 3 days, depending on when they're arrested and what's going on. But for a stalking charge that you guys had no idea that was coming, there was no contact prior to Carter's arrest, and to hold him for, you said 11 days is just, that is just beyond something that I can wrap my mind around, for such a nonviolent charge. So what, fast forward, well, no, it's not fast forward. Let's talk about kind of that 11-day period of time. I'm sure that took a toll on you guys mentally. That took a toll on Carter mentally and just your family as a whole. What were your guys' mindset? How were y'all mentally during that time? How did y'all handle that? And kind of, did they keep in contact with you during that time? Let's just talk about that period of 11 days.
So we were allowed phone calls from Carter twice a week, and then we could visit him on the Saturday. So we did visit him twice, and we had the phone calls. And of course, at that time, I was just, you have to trying to communicate with him what the attorney was doing, what juvenile was saying, and trying to figure out the process of juvenile, which was mind-blowing to me, the way it works, that they're not allowed any type of bond system. Once they're entered into the juvenile system, these kids have zero rights. They're treated worse than an animal. We had no right to do anything with him, no matter what we said or did or told juvenile. They would not listen to us. I didn't know anything about juvenile until this, and in hindsight, we've researched a lot of it. And the attorney that we hired gave us some terrible advice and said to do whatever they wanted us to do to get him out of jail, and then we would work towards getting everything dismissed after that. And so, knowing now that they have to file the official charges, which is called a petition in juvenile, that they have to file those within 10 days or they can no longer hold them in juvenile. It was 10 business days. He would have hit that 10 business days the day after he was released. And not knowing that, we agreed to anything they asked us to for Carter. And so the stipulations that they released him under was still no charges being filed were just insane.
Let's talk about all this stemmed from some sort of Snapchat post that wasn't even Carter's. So I'm assuming that they probably, they would probably want the phone and during this period of time to do and again, you just use this term loosely, forensic analysis of the phone. How did all that play out with the warrant, if they got a warrant?
So Carter was arrested on a Friday. The attorney that we talked to said, hey, get his keys and get his phone. So we asked Julie for both of those, and she said, well, we don't have his phone. So it didn't come with him, or it went to Longview with him. And so we were like, okay, well, we have Live 360 on the phone. And come to find out, the phone did not go with him to Longview. There was no warrant for the phone at this point. The phone moved over the course of that weekend before they got their warrant. It was at a residence for a solid day and a half. It was 20 miles one direction, 20 miles back one direction. Clearly not with Carter, not with the juvenile office. Carter was brought back to the juvenile office that Monday morning for court. And an Anderson County officer walked in with the phone and said, "Hey, unlock this." And Carter did. When he was brought back from after the court hearing back to the juvenile office before being transported back to Longview, the officer came in and presented him with a warrant at that time. So they had the phone in their possession that entire time. We, of course, when we noticed that the phone was moving, I contacted the juvenile office. And I'm like, "Hey, his phone's not with him. We have Live 360. And she said, "Well, I was wrong. My boss has had it this whole time. It's in her office." But the Live 360 showed it moving. So she said that Emily Lane had the phone, which is clearly a lie because it moved. And once they had it with their warrant, it went back. They kept it for over a year. We tried to, have it back because there were text messages on that phone that we thought, this will clear Carter. And a couple weeks after they had the phone, the attorney said, "Hey, they're not going to be able to use anything from the phone anyways. The warrant's bad. The warrant is for searching a vehicle for drugs, guns, and all this. It has nothing to do with the phone. So it's a bad warrant. They can't use anything anyways." Which didn't matter. There wasn't anything bad on the phone to begin with. And so once we finally did get the phone back, it was completely wiped. It had no more usable information on it. I was able to back it up from an old Apple backup, which got us back to May, not all the way to September when he was arrested, and gave us numerous text messages that we could use. And I had those and gave those to juvenile, and they did not care. They didn't care that you could visibly see that the family was contacting Carter. Everything was friendly. They're giving him mixed signals. Y'all can't talk. Y'all can't do this. And then you're getting a text message 20 minutes later, "We love you and we miss you." You're getting text messages from the ex-girlfriend. As soon as I turn 16, we're going to date again. "I love you." And you have all this coming to a 16-year-old kid. And he, it really messed with him when all this happened and he was arrested, and just zero understanding how people that swore they loved him could be as vindictive as they were for almost an entire year trying to gather evidence against him. A couple of the kids he was friends with since first grade they would make plans with Carter, and then they would go over to the family's house, and then they would send Carter Snapchats or send him text messages, arms around the girlfriend saying, "We're going to screw your girlfriend tonight," or, just all this stuff of everything that's going on. And Carter, of course, wasn't welcome over there. They would still have the younger daughter text my younger son and invite him to things, and not Carter. Like, it was just huge mixed signals to everyone involved in this. And later, come to find out, those kids came to us and said, "Hey, she was blackmailing us, telling us we had to send this text message, or they tell everybody we smoke weed." Or she would take our phones and text herself from them to Carter. And just back and forth stuff and they've done depositions, several of the kids have, to this very extent. And then we have a deposition from the family's other family member that a lot of the text messages that were made from the ex-girlfriend's phone to Carter were not the ex-girlfriend. They were the mom pretending to be her.
So all this stuff was on the phone when they took it, and there's so many issues with that, just from a legal standpoint. And so you have the fact Carter didn't have to open that phone. I mean, we can start there. He being such, that's a tactic. That's such a tactic. The juvenile system. All these systems are screwed up, but right now we're talking about the juvenile system. The fact that they can just come in and have a child open this phone, and to him, y'all are good people. Y'all have raised your kids well, and so I'm sure in Carter's mind, he's like, okay, this is a authoritative figure. He's telling me to do something, so I'm going to do it. And then they take that. So as soon as he opens that phone, that gives them the ability. Because here's the deal. Even hypothetically speaking, even if the warrant was correct, sounds like the warrant was screwed up, but even if the warrant was correct, they wouldn't have been able to get in the phone. There are ways to get in the phone, but it's not easy. And I tell you right now, James Hebner with Palestine Police Department, who does the forensic analysis for most of the county, I mean, if I had a case where I was working like child porn or child sexual assault or something, and it had a passcode, that dude couldn't get in the phone. So the fact of the matter is, had Carter not provided them with the passcode to open the phone, they wouldn't have been able to do anything anyway. But another thing that's crazy to me is the fact that, so that's a piece of evidence. So what are we doing with evidence these days? Are we just leaving it on the desk in the office? We don't have to log that. There's no chain of custody that we have to keep up with. I mean, and I'm just being facetious. There obviously is. I mean, if you're taking a piece of evidence, you can't just leave that on the freaking desk all weekend. And what's crazy to me too is you had Live 360. So it wasn't even on the desk. This thing was 20 miles up the road. That is such a problem. And there's the chain of custody there is, I mean, it's poisoned. And then you guys get the phone back and it's totally wiped. Like there's all the things are gone. And then you had to revert back to a backup to be able to get those things. That is just so freaking wild to me. That's just like the Wild West. We're doing what we want. There's no constitution. There's no laws. There's no chain of custody. None of this stuff we have to abide by in Palestine, Texas. And man, that's crazy. We could talk about that for a while, but so moving on, that 11 days, I mean, you guys are going through all this. So what were his conditions of release upon release? I mean, talk about that. What did he have to do?
So when we went to the hearing where he was finally released to us, the judge, who of course is supposed to be impartial at this point, orders the ankle monitor. And of course that's, over $300 a month. And he said that since Carter has caused all these problems for all these people, that he can pay for it himself. And, clearly no impartiality there, and said, I'm basically your parent now. The difference between me and your parents is they love you and I don't. And so he stood there and basically treated Carter as if he was already guilty. And we're to the point where still there are no official charges filed. He is released to us on an ankle monitor. He cannot be farther than 10 feet away from a guardian, which was me and my husband. And then they did allow my brother to be part of that because he worked for my brother. And so, of course, you can't make him pay for it if you don't allow him to go work. So he is not allowed in Anderson County at all unless it's to report. He cannot have a phone. He cannot have social media. He can't have a TV in his room. He has to have permission to leave the county that we moved to. He has to have permission to go anywhere. Like if we left our house, we had to have permission.
So this is something that stands out to me that I find crazy. So you guys live in Anderson County. You're established there. All your kids go to school there. You have a house, and the conditions are he can't be in Anderson County. What did y'all do?
When Carter was arrested, I did go ahead and remove my younger son from the school. And immediately at that point, we owned our home in Anderson County free and clear. So I thought, you know what? Let me just find somewhere to rent that I can take Chris and I can take Carter, and we can go let Chris finish up school, let Carter finish up school. And so we did go ahead and move to Van Zandt County, but we have to, we had no house payments and we owned our home, and we had to find a rental home in Van Zandt County in the school district for Christopher. So we did that. And then once we found out that Carter's going to be released on an ankle monitor, of course, he didn't want to go to a public school with an ankle monitor on. And so we did just continue with him to do online school. But, the point of juvenile is to, make sure these kids are doing what they're supposed to do and they're doing good and all these things. And they were never concerned about Carter with school. Never. And he's a 16-year-old kid at this point. Never once were they concerned about school. Basically, they just wanted him out of the county. And after that, all we did was come back to report. And then, of course, shortly after that, Corona hit. So we never even came back to report. We just did phone calls. And so it was very clear that that's all that this was, that it was we want to know where he is, and that's all they care about.
Did Carter have any contact? And we'll talk about this website at the end of the podcast so everybody knows and they can kind of just go read up on the timeline, because there is a website. But, I was reading the website, and we may have to back up just a hair to talk about this. But, and then I want to get back to the house thing, because, I want to know if you guys ever got to go back home and what happened with that. But I do want to back up and talk about the contact that Carter had with law enforcement right before his arrest, or sometime before his arrest. Can you kind of talk about that a little bit? Because that reading that on the website just blew my mind. So talk about that for a minute.
So about a week and a half before he was arrested, September 4th, 2019, Carter left, drove to Athens to go pick up my older son for work, his brother. And on their way back, right outside of Crossroads, they were pulled over by a Henderson County constable. The traffic stop ended up being over an hour and 40 minutes. But the immediate stop, of course, was just the constable, so there's no dash cam for this, no body cams. It was the constable that stopped, and then right after him, a volunteer fireman stopped with him. They walked up to the car. Carter, of course, was the driver, rolled the window down, and he said, "What's your name?" And he said, "Carter Gentry." And my older son and Carter both said at this point, the constable opens the car door and yanks Carter out of the car. Searches him, pushes him around. My older son is out of the car, like, well, what in the world is going on? And so for about the first 10 minutes of the stop, it's them just basically harassing the kids, but it was clear from the start that they were there for Carter.
All right, so what's your first name? Tyler. All right, Tyler, listen, okay? I'm going to explain that. I told you, just give us a few minutes, let's get everything worked out. I'll explain to you what's going on. So we got a tip, we got a phone call that this girl, I don't know who it was. We don't know who it was. I'm telling you. Hey. Just listen, that this vehicle was over here around the school and in this area, toting guns, toting narcotics. Okay? All right, so.
And Carter asked easily 30 times during the stop, what are we being pulled over for? What did we do? Can you give me the reason for the stop? Can you give me the reason for the stop? Can you let me call my mom? All of these things. And the constable, at one point waves his phone in front of Carter and was like, "No, you can't fucking call your mommy." And, in depositions from this, the constable even admits that he escalated the situation. As a police officer, as a trained police officer, he admits that he escalated the situation. But they expected these two teenage kids to not escalate a situation. They weren't told what was going on, nothing that happened. Carter was body slammed by this 300-pound constable up against a concrete bridge with an easy 50-foot drop on the other side and handcuffed at that point. And you can see this in the dash cam. And my older son was separated from him at that point, cuffed and put in the back of a cop car. And at this point, they had not asked my older son what his name was, who he was. They didn't search him. They didn't do anything. They still wouldn't tell anybody what the traffic stop was for. Once again, I have Live 360. And I noticed that they were stopped in one location for too long. And I'm like, I got to go check on them. I was terrified that they'd had a wreck. And I pull around a corner and I see 9 cop cars behind my kid's car. And I had no clue what was going on. So I pull up and 2 of the cops immediately come to the other side of the road where I am and tell me I can't come over. And that they're calling a drug dog out to search the vehicle, and they'd received an anonymous tip. And once I knew what the nature of that call was, I would have more understanding. Within me being there, probably 10 minutes, the drug dog comes, does a quick search around the vehicle, and of course finds nothing and leaves. And at this point, they're scrambling to figure out what they're supposed to do with these kids, because you got 2 of them in handcuffs. You have a very angry mother. And they finally go back and release Tyler and tell him, we know more is going to come from this. We apologize. Thank you for talking to us. They finally get his information, write it down. There was no actual report filed about this traffic stop because I asked for it. There was nothing filed, nothing. No report filed by any person at this traffic stop. And I had a friend in law enforcement that told me, hey, get the dash cam. So I did. And we watched that, and we kind of put together a few things from the dash cam that are like, wait a second. And then I figured out I need to get the call that was made to dispatch, which is the reason they stopped. Finally at the end, they said we received an anonymous tip. It was called into dispatch that there was drugs and guns in the car and blah, blah, blah. So I got the call from dispatch, and it was not an anonymous tip. It was made by the deputy chief of Henderson County.
Sheriff's Office, this is Katie.
Hey, Katie, this is Kevin. Do we have anybody down at Crossroads right now?
Not that I know of.
What's the closest unit?
Honestly, I wish I could tell you, but the iPads aren't working.
Okay.
I have Victor
All right.
on the... I can see where Brad Myers is. He's been calling in all morning.
Yeah, tell them they're got a vehicle of interest. It's a yellow or blue Mustang, newer model, like the last couple of years, that's traveling towards Athens from Crossroads on 59. Information he's supposed to have dope and guns. A kid, 16-year-old.
So he's on FM 59?
Yep. What's his name? Carter Gentry is his name.
Do you know how to spell the last name?
Gentry, Gentry.
Oh, Gentry, okay.
Yeah.
So possible guns and drugs.
Narcotics. Yep.
Okay, I'll get someone in that area.
Thank you, ma'am.
That kind of stands out because you have the chief deputy saying, hey, he's going to be in a blue or yellow. So if it was seen at the drug house, wouldn't they know exactly what car was at the drug house? I mean, are they colorblind? Like, talk about that. Y'all had two cars.
Well, so we had two. Both of the boys had a Mustang, and one was blue, one was yellow, and they would both drive whichever one was closest to you out of the driveway, whichever one had the most gas. It wasn't this one's mine, this one's his. We did buy the yellow one for Carter, and then Tyler went back and bought the blue one, but they shared vehicles. I mean, I drove them as much as they drove them. My husband drove them. Carter's friends drove them. He, finding out now, he let his friends drive it anytime they wanted to, even though we're like, don't let anybody else drive the car. And so they couldn't tell what color it was. All of the stories changed. The original officer that released them at the scene said they'd received a call. It was an anonymous tip. Then he says the call came from the resource officer at the high school. And then come to find out it came from the chief deputy himself. And then you go back in further and there was a lot of the dash cam that we couldn't hear. And so we had a professional that is often used in cases to go and enhance the video. And you can hear, Halbert does arrive on the stop much later into it. And my son knows who that is, my older son, because, Halbert has daughters that are Tyler's age, and Tyler dated one of them shortly. And so he was like, he knew who that was. And he said, Mom, Halbert was there. And so we went back and had that part analyzed much later. We should have done it much earlier. And the cop in uniform, just the regular deputy, is asking Carter, who did you make mad? And Carter tells him the family's name. And so he said, I'm going to call dispatch and find out who made this call. And so he is on the line with dispatch, and he goes, oh, okay, hold up. He's walking up. I'll just talk to him. And he says, hey, is this who made this call? And he says it. He says they've been stalking the shit out of them and going around school threatening to kill their whole family. And this kid's our next MVP. This is what the second in command in Henderson County says about a 16-year-old kid with no other information, no proof besides what someone he is friends with tells him. Nothing else. My kids have had no charges. They've never been in trouble. None of them. We've never been arrested, never been in trouble, never done anything wrong. They're not known to carry guns. We didn't, there's no guns owned. There's no guns in my house. And so there is a point in the dash cam before the drug dogs arrived, and there are cops there, two of them in uniform, the rest are plain clothes. So these are not your lower level people at this traffic stop. And I watched in the dash cam, I didn't notice it when I was there, that there is one in particular that keeps his hands in his pockets, walks across to the other side of the highway while the drug dog is there, and doesn't come back until the drug dog is gone. And I do feel like that they planned on planting drugs in the car, and me pulling up stopped that.
What was the PC for the stop?
There was no reason given. Like they didn't receive a ticket. So the constable says he made the stop because his deputy chief told him to.
Okay, so it sounds to me like there was no probable cause for a stop. And, I have to talk about that because I'm the cop, right? So you cannot just stop somebody because somebody says, hey, they're doing this, or, the only way that flies is if you have something along the lines of, a major aggravated assault or a robbery, and something serious just takes place and there's a description given, and then you can make an investigative stop. So my question is, if there was no probable cause for the stop, they said it's a blue or yellow car, how did they know that they were in the area?
We are pretty sure that they had a private investigator following Carter.
Okay, so that doesn't fly. You can't just stop somebody because they say, hey, they may have guns or drugs in the car. You still have to have a probable cause to make that stop. So there's problem number one. Problem number two for me is, how long was the stop?
An hour and 40 minutes.
So the stop was an hour and 40 minutes, which is a very long time to end up finding nothing. And so there's case law on this, and it clearly states you cannot prolong a traffic stop longer than a reasonable amount of time to wait on if you're going to bring a canine to do an open air sniff because you suspect there may be drugs in the car. That's fine. But how long was it before the drug dog got there?
I believe it was about an hour into the dash cam, but there was about 20 minutes that there was no dash cam recording because there was no one there with one.
Yeah, see, that's a huge problem. You cannot hold somebody on the side of the road for that long waiting on a drug dog, and then come to find out they didn't even find anything. Just to confirm, this all happened just like a week or so before he was arrested, right?
Yes, 9 days exactly.
Going back to, you guys leaving your house and you're having to go rent in another county. Carter's on this ankle monitor that you are having to pay $300 for. How long was he on these conditions before they formally brought the charges?
He was released to us in September. They did not formally bring charges until the following July.
And so what was your contact with, Allison Mitchell's the district attorney during this time. Were you in contact with her? Did she keep you guys updated if she didn't, or if she did? How was that?
So we switched attorneys in December of 2019, and that attorney was out of Smith County. We decided we didn't need anybody inside Anderson County. Well, he only met with stone walls. He would try to get hearings. He would contact juvenile. He would contact the court coordinator. He would contact the judge. He would contact Allison Mitchell. He would contact over and over. He would send letters. He would make phone calls. And for months and months and months, he was flat out ignored. He would file motions that were ignored, like for months. We have copies of these that show how many times he'd mail it, how many times he'd email and get nothing. And he filed motions for tons of things that were just ignored, constantly ignored. And, one of them was, you kind of need to press the actual charges on him, So he was arrested in September, but they didn't even get the statement from the alleged victim until the following May. And that was not done in person. It was done by email. So I don't know that the DA ever spoke with the victim at all. So they finally get the statement from her, 7 months after he's been arrested. No statement was taken before he was arrested, which doesn't make sense to me. You'd think you'd need that before you could get him arrested. None of that was done before he was arrested. And so he's been on all these conditions and on them for almost a year before they officially charged him. And at that point, we were in the middle of Corona, and they knew we couldn't do a trial. And they knew we would want a jury trial. So that allowed them to continue to prolong things. We did a few Zoom hearings. In one of the Zoom hearings, the DA says, I don't know that I have enough evidence to go to trial. And they still kept this going for over a full year past that Zoom hearing. This went on for almost 3 years before he was released from the conditions.
So you guys had to pay for this ankle monitor for 3 years. Like, did that ever get to go away? Like, or what happened with that?
So they did allow the ankle monitor to be removed about a year and a half later. He had also, in this meantime, been court-ordered counseling. So that was once a week, $150. And we went to the counselor about 8 times. And the counselor said, they ordered drug counseling and anger management. And she said, so that's what I'm going to do. But he doesn't need that. He's not angry. She said he's very well adjusted. He's a wonderful kid. He clearly is not a drug addict. And she said, that's what we're going to do. She said, but I'm going to tell you what is wrong with him. He has PTSD. She said he has trauma from this. He has trauma from the arrest. He has trauma from people in authority that are supposed to be protecting you, doing the opposite to him as a child. He has trauma from the family that he thought loved him, basically trying to destroy him. And she said, so while I will be counseling him on the drugs, because that's what they said, and the anger management, because that's what they said, she said, we are going to also focus on the trauma.
Man, so you guys really went through it. I'll be honest with you. I'm trying to think of all the conditions and things that I've seen over my years of doing this. I don't think I've ever seen anything that says you have to leave the county of where you reside. I mean, that proposes a big problem. And so you guys had to do that. You had to pay for this ankle monitor. You had to pay for this counseling. And I just can't imagine the toll that it probably took on you guys, just mentally, physically, financially. And even Carter, I mean, he's a kid. He's probably like, what the hell, all because I had some young love with this girl, and Jesus Christ. So did you guys ever, at what point did y'all go back home?
Well, you can't go home to a house that's burned down. So in October, I started receiving texts from a realtor asking if we wanted to sell our house. And of course I said, no, we're not going to sell the house. If anything, we will come back when this is finished, or, my daughter was going to move in it. And that was 3 or 4 texts, cash offers made, never any discussion of who it was. That was about a week and a half before the house burned down. In mid-October, the attorney called and told Carter, hey, I've had these kids talk to me that have talked about being blackmailed to send stuff to Carter to try to get him to behave badly so they could finally have some evidence to use that he is aggressive, that he is violent. And of course, they never got any of that. And they're willing to testify that this was done. And I think if you give me about 30 days, this will all be dismissed and y'all can go back home. And the day after we received that call from the attorney, we got a call from one of Carter's friends. In the middle of the day, we were all in Dallas. We have stands at the State Fair of Texas, so we were all working. My youngest son was with one of his friends because he was going to school in the other county, and he stayed with them while we were working the fair. And this friend calls us and says, hey, guys, your house is on fire in the middle of the day. And, that was just mind-blowing. We still now, 4 years later, are like, oh, that was in the house. Yeah, we don't have that because that was in the house. And then when your kid passes away and you realize you don't have any of his memories because they all burned in the house, it gets even harder. So it was investigated by the state fire marshal. It was 100% arson. That investigation was handed over to the Anderson County Sheriff's Office, and we never received a return phone call. There was never any investigation done. There was nothing done with it once the fire marshal handed his investigation over to them. So we have nothing from it. Nothing happened.
So you talk to the fire marshal, and he tells you that is, indeed an arson. He does a report. turns it over to Anderson County, and then it just, you guys never saw it? It just disappeared?
We never saw the report, and I called up there a few times, made a few emails, and never got any response from anybody.
So what the hell happened to your house? I mean, obviously it was arson, but do you guys even know? I'm sure you have a suspicion. You can't just say what you probably want to say or what you're thinking, but I mean, do you guys have thoughts on that?
We do, and there was only a few people that wouldn't want to see us live back in Cayuga. So, and it circles right around the family. And of course, you can't prove anything, and you'll never be able to prove anything, but nobody else would have burned our house down. We didn't have enemies. None. No one. I mean, you go talk to people about Carter, and everyone loved him. Like, they loved him. I mean, there was 1,500 people at his memorial service. 1,500 people. And from all walks of life, kids, families. I mean, people we knew, people he knew, people that I didn't even know he knew that showed up, that just, because he was loved and he was liked. And I think that was a lot of the problem in the entire situation, is no matter what they did and no matter what they said, they couldn't ever convince everyone that Carter was a bad person. They never convinced everyone that he was a bad kid, that, he was dangerous. And anywhere he went, that they were, and they still see all these people gravitate to Carter, and it made them angry, and their daughter very much loved Carter. And I don't think that they ever wanted it to where we would be back, where she would have to see his face again.
So did you guys, I mean, what was the resolution on the house? I mean, did y'all have insurance? Like, how did, I can't imagine, was anything recovered? What did you guys do with that?
No, the house burned completely to the ground. There was nothing recovered. There was nothing left. We did have insurance, not nearly enough. But we do still have the property there. We chose not to rebuild there. And we probably never will, just because, I would never move back until my youngest graduates regardless. But at this point, we're really happy in our area, and we like it. And so I don't see us ever moving back there, but we just, at the point where, we did receive the insurance, it just wasn't something that Carter couldn't go back anyways. And so we just chose not to. And at this point, that just seems to be the best solution for our family.
So let's talk about the case. I mean, all this, Jesus Christ, you are going through all this stuff. Your house burns down. You going through COVID, which put financial strain on everybody in general, plus the extra things that you guys had going on. I mean, what happened with the case? Did they end up dropping it? Did they take it forward? What did they do?
So this continued on and on and on, and our attorney filed probably 10 to 15 motions that were ignored. We finally did get a Zoom hearing. The judge ordered the DA to give the rest of the evidence to the attorney that they kept saying they had. We have him driving past the house. We have him following her around school. We have all of these things. But there was never any additional evidence given because there was no proof of any of it. They said they had videos of this, and this, but none of that was ever turned over because it didn't exist. So finally, in June, the judge is like, hey, you need to get all this done. You have until this date. You have until that date to get this sent to the attorney. We've done probably 6 to 8 Zoom hearings. The court coordinator's never been on any of them, but on this last one in June, she was. Julie's been on all of them until March. And in March of 2021, Julie never communicates with us again. She never calls Carter to call in. She doesn't check on him. She doesn't do anything. And so we have this Zoom hearing, and the judge says, hey, we're going to do pretrial in August, and then we're going to go to trial. And the court coordinator pops up at this point and says, hey, he turns 18 July 31st. We're going to lose our jurisdiction. So what do we do? And this was their out. This was what they were going to do. They were just going to lose jurisdiction and never get to it, blame Corona, so they couldn't get everything finished. And the judge blew that out of the water because he said, hey, because of Corona, we're given an additional 12 months to prosecute things. So they couldn't use that. And they wanted to. So they couldn't use him turning 18. So at that point, he had given them so many days to send things over, and our attorney got none of them. So he filed a motion to dismiss everything and said, you have failed to provide evidence to prove your side. You failed to provide evidence on any of it. And further that, we have provided Brady material. We provided Brady material on more than one occasion that Carter is innocent, that he didn't do this. And so on July 2nd, 2021, he was arrested in September of 2019. The case was fully dismissed. The criminal case was fully dismissed.
What were your guys' thoughts and feelings at that point? I mean, how did y'all... I mean, I'm sure that was some sort of relief.
It was relief that he could finally live his life. You know, he can go do the things he wanted to do, but it was also very disappointing that he was never going to get his day in court. That he was never going to get to tell his side of the story. You know, this whole time that we've been showing people the things that happened and nobody would listen. And we thought, well, at least in court, somebody's going to have to listen. We'll have a jury, you know, and of course, you know, you never know what a jury is going to decide, but we had so much proof. And so much, just it's in black and white. It wasn't a he said, she said. You know, everything they have is he said, she said. They didn't provide anything black and white. And so it was frustrating that he wouldn't get his day in court, but relief that he could live his life at that point. And so after it was dismissed, we met with civil attorneys and we filed civil lawsuits on September the 1st. And shortly after that, the family in turn filed a civil suit against Carter, my husband and I, for harassment in Van Zandt County, tried to get a restraining order against us, which they did not receive. And then since that point in 2021, that has been dragging out until now to go to court and been rescheduled. And they've fought us on people giving depositions and just dragging that out as well. And then the lawsuit in Henderson County has been rescheduled twice now as well.
So what are they, I mean, what kind of harassment are they thinking they're going to sue you guys for? I mean, what's their basis?
A bunch of Facebook posts. They probably have about 50 printed memes that I've shared on Facebook or my husband shared on Facebook that is, to their thought process, all about them. That everything we post is all about them and everything is harassing. And that's the evidence they have, is really some Facebook posts. I took pictures at a basketball game for our students where my kids go to school, and when we played Cayuga, and I blurred their daughter's face out. You know, she is a minor. As a photographer, you are allowed to post pictures at a public event. There is no expectation of privacy, but I just thought it was safest not to post her face. They included that and said that because I blurred her out, I was harassing them. Just like, it could be a meme about, like my husband shared a meme about Tombstone, the movie. And they were like, that's about them. And he was like, I just like the movie. Just like the wildest stuff you could, they will call our attorney. I mean, often my daughter actually connected with a psychic medium and she posted it. And they called the attorney about that because they thought that's all about them and they didn't want that out there. Like, what? And it's just, it goes on and on and on that anything we do, he'll call and say, hey, you know, they're saying this now. Hey, they're doing this now. And it's just, it's a basis of no proof whatsoever. And we have done depositions. All of my children have done depositions. Carter's friends have done depositions. And they are still fighting that the actual victim in this, the daughter, does not have to give a deposition or be at court. And so that is the last hold off that we have. And they still, even though now it's court ordered, still we have no date set for this and we're supposed to go to court August the 9th.
So I know, maybe this is just mind blowing, all of it, you know, but then it just doesn't end, right? Like, and I know this is, you know, this is the hard part. Carter passes away in December of 2021. So from the time the case was dismissed until Carter passes away in December, how long was that?
About 5 months.
So you guys have this 5 months to where you're finally like, hey, you know, we can get some breathing room here. Try our best to move forward with what we can, with the things that we've gone through, and then, you know, you lose your child. Talk about that time. I know it's hard, but there are people that are listening, and, you know, you said something a minute ago. You were like, you know, Carter will have his chance in court, and he never got that chance. And honestly, he never got a chance to speak about it, period. And so that's why we're here today. That's why we're using this platform. We're here to tell Carter's story for him. So talk about that, and in your own words, how you guys handled all of that.
He passed away on December 3rd. He had a car accident. And hard is not the right word for that. It made it harder knowing that he had lost 3 years of his life before it happened, didn't get to be a teenager, didn't get to be a kid. You know, all of this changed him. It hardened him. You know, it was hard. It was hard. And then he passes away, and we chose to make something as beautiful from it as we can. And so we did a toy drive on his memorial that was 10 vehicles filled to the brim of toys, and we donated it to Toys for Tots. We did that again last year, where we did a huge toy drive, and we actually took that to Palestine for their Blue Santa. A huge amount again. And so we continue to do things in his honor. He was the fun kid, you know. He was the skydiving, full speed, go kid. And I've done more things since he passed that I swore I would never do, because I actually went I did a skydive, and because I told Carter I would never do it, and I did it because of him. And we did that on Mother's Day. And we do we go on vacation and take all of his people. You know, we take his friends, we take all these extra kids and everybody that loved him, and we talk about him, and we remember him, and we try to do things the way we think that he would. You know, he wouldn't want us to quit. And I don't have anything to lose at this point. You know, what do we have to lose? We don't have Carter. I mean, we don't. So everybody, you know, of course, as soon as he passed, everybody just assumes we're going to drop everything. Even attorneys do. And I couldn't quit on him. I couldn't quit.
So what can, the people that are listening to this, talk about, you know, obviously the website that you guys created. I want to put that out there, but I want you to talk about it. What can people do to help you guys and continue to put Carter's voice out there? What can people do?
Just continually share his story. I mean, I do think people need to be more aware of the way the juvenile system works, and these kids have no rights. And so the more we share his story and show that, you know, they really can do what they want, and our hands were completely tied. I mean, we couldn't do anything. So the more we share his story, our hope is we couldn't help our kid. You know, we stood behind him and we fought for him tooth and nail, but we didn't win anything with that. You know, so our hope is maybe we help the next kid. And the more we talk about this, that we help the next kid. And we do have the website. My daughter actually built that. And when they found out that in the depositions for the civil suit that's against us, they added her to the civil suit. So she's also being sued because she is in charge of the website.
So what is how can people access that website? It is
cartersvoice.com. And there's a dash between Carter's and Voice. So CARTERS-voice.com.
So this is why I have taken the position that I've taken here at Failing Justice, is because here you have the Gentry story with Carter, and this is just one of many. This is just one county who has wreaked havoc on so many people's lives. People have lost everything at the hands of those who are supposed to be for them. You know, one thing when I did investigations, my job was very much so to prove somebody innocent just as much as to prove them guilty. And, that doesn't happen. And that's why I do what I do. And that's why we're here making this recording today. So I want everybody to check that website out, carters-voice.com. Share this podcast, share this story, and we have to make a change. And nothing's going to happen unless we do it. And these folks that are in these positions of quote unquote power, they don't bank on people like Tammy and her husband and her family. They don't bank on people like that speaking up and standing up for themselves. And I just want to encourage everybody, because everybody's fearful. Not only just in Palestine, I got a pretty big following in Palestine, but I'm talking everywhere. People are just afraid to stand up to this system, because when you do, it typically, man, I had a guy, I applied for Bullard Police Department, probably, I guess maybe back in the beginning of the year, January. And I just wanted, I missed the job. Not that I needed to go back. I just, I wanted to get back in. And all the things that came up about me during Bullard PD's background investigation, the lieutenant at Bullard PD says, man, you typically when you put on a fight with district judges and district attorneys and police chiefs, it usually doesn't bode well for you. It's just best to sit down and be quiet. And I looked at him and I said, well, I'll tell you right now, I'm not going to be quiet. That's what they want me to do. That's what they want us to do, and it's not going to happen. And that's what they bank on. They bank on us being quiet and not saying anything. And Carter's voice, in my opinion, it's going to live on. And I'm very much so wanted it on this platform because I wanted more people to hear it, because there's a lot of people that don't know about it. So, Bill, thank you for coming in and sharing this story. And I would like for you to just give some final words about Carter and this entire situation.
We will continue to be his voice as long as we can breathe. And he will always be remembered. I've received text messages, phone calls from people that knew Carter, that I didn't know knew Carter, talking stories about him. I had a lady message me that's handicapped and was trying to go into a store one day, and like everybody was in her way, nobody would help her. And Carter ran up and opened the door for her and helped her get in. And then when she was done shopping, he helped her out to her car, and he helped her, unload the groceries and all of these things. And she said it just stuck with her that here's this kid, kids don't do this anymore. And he just held conversations. She said, like, he saw me as a person, and people don't do that anymore because I have a disability. And she said that just spoke to me, and I remembered his name. She said, I remembered it. And then when I saw that he had passed away, I just knew that I had to contact you. And that's one of probably 20 stories that we have from strangers. And then we have, so many of his friends that still contact us and love on us and check on us and visit. And everybody, Carter will live on in everyone's hearts. And we push for him, and we will continue to push for him. And it's because of him, because he taught us that. He taught us that you love people for who they are, and you stand up for them, and you show them that, you show that to your people. He had, like I said, he had so many friends that he brought them home because they didn't know what love was. And that's what we try to continue on with, is that we show what he did. We try to show that to people, and we will continue to fight his fight, like I said, just in case that it helps the next kid.
Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. I want to let our listeners know that there's a way that you can help support our organization. If you go to our website at www.thisisfailingjustice.com, scroll all the way to the bottom of the homepage, and there you're going to find a donation link. Any amount you can donate will help us further our mission and reach more people. We believe it's really important to keep spreading the word about the issues that are plaguing our criminal justice system and how we can make it better. It is crucial to keep fighting for the change, and with your support, we can do just that.
This is Failing Justice.